Hello there, I am Gautam. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit in on my presentation. Today, we will be talking about the decision-making process in implementing design technology. We are living in a time where there is a lot of tools available to us, and I want to work with you in helping you understand from my experience with our office as to how we make some important as well as key decisions in utilizing the right platforms to deliver our projects in the most concise and efficient manner. I work for Steinberg Hart. We are based out of Los Angeles, California, with a total of 6 offices across the United States. A little about me. I was born and raised in Mumbai, and I moved here to Los Angeles in 2001 fall to pursue a master's degree in building science at the University of Southern California. I'm a diehard Trojan, fight on, and proud of it. I also have a bachelor's degree in architecture from Manipal Institute of Technology. I am a DBI professional, which means that I have a special amount of interest in working with projects that have the design build method of project delivery. I also speak at a lot of conferences from time to time, and I consider myself very passionate when it comes to design technology and architecture. In my free time, I have a Harley Davidson and I have a Royal Enfield, which is a throwback to my times back in India. So I ride my motorcycle and see my family that live in Mumbai every now and then. So here are some of the projects that I've worked on in the past. On the top left corner, you will see the Los Angeles World Airport's LAX, the international terminal for LA. It's called Tom Bradley, and on the left and right hand side of that are the 2 concourses that were also a part of the design upgrade as well as renovations for the airport. On the right top corner is what is called as the Cove. It is a part of the San Diego International Airport expansion to double the square footage. So I have a little bit of experience in aviation. At the bottom left corner, there are 2 pictures, the leftmost being of Miro Towers, which is under construction right now, and this is with Steinberg Hart. It's a fully integrated project in terms of how the different steps have been kept in mind when it comes to digital delivery and documents. And this is with Steinberg Hart. The next image is of the Godfrey Hotel in Hollywood, California, which is also under construction. And then finally, right bottom corner is my baby, as I like to call it, the Levi Stadium for the San Francisco 49ers in Santa Clara, California. As I mentioned in the previous slides, I work for Steinberg Hart, and as I mentioned, we have a total of 6 offices in North America and then another annex in Shanghai. I work out of the LA office, and I lead the BIM VDC practice for all the offices, and I'm also very deeply involved with the design technology group. So let's start with our conversation today. I have taken the liberty to divide up our conversation into 6 modules. The first will be about project delivery. I will get you acquainted with the different systems available in the United States. And some of you may be acquainted with this, whereas some of you may have seen variables of this within the practice in India or any other part of the world that you're in. The second module is about inventory management. We will talk about the different tools available at hand within your practice. And although I'm going to show you some examples, I would encourage you to create similar maps, as you will see, in developing your own inventory. Module 3 talks about how to listen carefully, not only from a design requirement standpoint, but also as professionals. Module 4 is about asking the right questions. How do you ask the right questions and set yourself as well as your team up to provide the maximum amount of capabilities in your project delivery endeavor? Module 5 deals with implementing, which is putting all of that into practice. And it's as simple as making sure that all the benchmarks you've set are put in motion as your team starts to build the set of drawings for your project delivery, as well as digital data that you may be possibly delivering. Module number 6 is about summarizing and lessons learned. So let's start, right? Project delivery systems. So as I mentioned in one of my earlier slides when I was doing the introduction, one of the main reasons project delivery systems are in place is to manage risk and underscore liability. Every project has a cost associated with it, right? Aside from cost, what is the biggest concern? Safety of people that put in their efforts when the project is in construction. With safety comes law. So if there is an insurance related claim in place, someone has to be liable for an accident that may or invariably may not have happened due to human error, or it was a freak incident. In that case, insurance comes into play, and it's very important to make sure that you have all the clauses in place. So that's where risk and liability are an important part. Obviously, aside from that, you want to have a certain structure to how you deliver a project, and that's why you have delivery systems in place. What I'm going to do next is acquaint you with the different systems that we typically utilize in North America. If you have any variations, I would also encourage you to review that so that your team members, immaterial of what tier they are in, get acquainted with the system and know how your project moves forward. Okay, so let's get right into it. The first system that is the most commonplace is the design bid build. As you can see on the leftmost side of the slide, the conduit between the conversations that occur between the designer as well as the general contractor pass through the owner. So there's always the owner that needs to leverage all the conversations. It's a sort of a long-winded approach. So say, for instance, the civil engineer has to provide a response to one of the subs under the general contractor. So do you see the entire stream of people that they have to cross through to get that information to them? It's long-winded. It's a traditional system of delivery. And believe me when I say that it works in many cases. The second category is multi-prime. The term prime essentially means the prime agreement. And I think in India, there's a term that they use called either a bid or a tender. So the agreement which is utilized to bind legally the different parties is called a prime agreement. In a multi-prime scenario, the owner holds all the different prime agreements for the designers, the subcontractors, as well as the systems designers within each group. In the previous one that you saw, the designer could hold the primes for all the design or the system designers, but the general contractor will hold the agreements for their subcontractors, right? So you see the difference here. The owner in the second case holds all the prime agreements. In the third case, you have a slight variation where although the owner holds the agreements, there may be very well two sets of general contractors. One that prepares the set of documents which are called as criteria documents, which sets the standards for what the project criteria is required. And then you may have a second set of designers or general contractors that come in and complete or fulfill the requirements based on that conversation. And in many cases, there is what is called as a GMP, which is a contractual system, which stands for guaranteed maximum price. So when you value engineer your project, it will have a maximum value. And that's what you are binding as your adherence to the prime agreement. And that's why you have a criteria that sets the standard for the GMP, and then another contractor might come and meet that criteria based on that. So again, the loop is quite different, but one of the reasons this system is in place, because when you have infrastructure and federal related projects, it seems much more conducive to use this system. All these systems are beneficial, but the next two that I'm going to discuss seem to be the most conducive for privatized as well as a little bit of public construction, but in terms of how integrated they are in their project. So let's get to the next one, which is design build. In design build, you have a simple system. The designer and the general contractor sit on the same team, and they form the basis for creating the prime agreements between all the designers as well as the subcontractors. All right. So why are we talking about all of this? We are talking about all of this because this is what will set the pace for realizing your project schedule. The way you deliver your project, the way the conversations happen between you, your systems designers, the owner, the general contractor, and his or her subs will predicate how you develop your documents. And there are these 5 different bullet points that predicate that, right? These are the important ones. You have design dialogue benchmarks. These are predominantly the benchmarks you set at the beginning of the project. When your designers are talking to the client and setting up the requirements, what are the square footages, what are the different utilities you need in your building, and so forth. There's very well a possibility that an RFQ, a request for qualifications, may be set in place, which means when you apply for a particular program, you have to show through your prior experience that you are qualified for that. And then once you qualify for it, you could have a possibility of providing a proposal to respond to an RFP, which is a request for proposal. Then you have the regulatory agency benchmarks, which means it could be a city or a state or another general body, a regulatory body that makes sure that your project drawings are safe and meet the standards required by law for safety as well as constructability purposes. Value engineering benchmarks, on the other hand, is something that you see when you want to set a price. And every now and then you want to take a step back when you are on a particular project, see how far along you've come, the amount that has been set aside versus how much is being targeted through your drawings needs to be compared. Those are the value engineering benchmarks. So you see how many different pit stops you have to meet in all of your project timeline. So being aware of this, not just at the project manager level, but also at the every team member level, allows you to make the right decisions in terms of how you time yourself, which invariably allows you to pick the tools, the digital tools you need to set that precedent based on the timeline. Finally, you have the design deliverable benchmarks, which are the typical that you see, that you learn in school, that you deliver on a regular basis again and again and again. The favorite term that all of us architects, immaterial of where you're in the world, use are called deadlines. And that's what these benchmarks entail to. Finally, if you are in the United States, it also matters, depends on what kind of a construction type you're going. And I have a little slide further down the line that tell you or will inform you on what the different types of construction are, which basically is all predicated on or dependent on how combustible your building materials are, right? All right, let's go to the next slide. So type 1 fire resistive, type 2 non-combustible. Type 1 is predominantly the high rises, the steel construction that you see. Type 2, type 3, type 4, and type 5 are listed on the left hand side. And then on the right hand side is the ideal case. I'm calling it an ideal case simply because of the fact that this is a system of project delivery that requires everyone, which is all hands on deck, to be present at all meetings and decision-making process. It really begs the question to make sure that everybody is not only informed but integrating, not just collaborating. Notice the difference between the two terms. Collaborating is when you're working together. Integrating is not only when you're working together, but you are learning from each other as well as teaching each other something else. That's why it's called an integrated project delivery system. The ideal case scenario, but not exactly possible in every project, because a lot of decisions have to be made ahead of time. The owner needs to be extremely well versed with the project criteria so that when they bring in the requirements are set. The designers as well as the contractors, which is the design build body, for instance, is able to make informed decisions based on the criteria set by the owner. So why are we talking about all of this? Let's summarize this in one particular slide. Look at the timeline, right? All this that is happening right now is your team as well as you running towards that particular benchmark, which is occupancy and maintenance. But in all of this, what is happening is you have to pick and choose the right amount of tools to stay on target. A lot of us are acquainted with the old school tools, pencil and paper, AutoCAD, Revit, Bentley's MicroStation, CATIA, whichever may be the case. There are so many different variables, but within all of that, you have to make sure that all of these platforms talk to each other. And all that is happening in concurrent with all of this benchmark related timelines, right? So that's module number 1. That was a lot, but let's keep going. Inventory management. I am presently taking a course with Cornell, and that has really helped me understand the process of decision making, and that's why I have this map shown to you. The variables on the left hand side help you understand where you need to stand in terms of the competence of your decision process, and on the right hand side This is an example, by the way, is how you arrive at a particular decision. And when it comes to this decision-making process, the first thing you want to be able to do is inventorize your tools. So here's a map that we use at Steinberg Hart that allows us to visibly see what are the tools available at hand for us to start with. Early design. I have designers that work with SketchUp. Then I have designers that work with Rhino. If they're using Rhino, there's a very good chance they could be using scripting tools like Grasshopper, Lunchbox, Ladybug, whatever may be the case. Then, as the designers are starting their work, there could be very well a set of another designers that are doing the programming. Within the programming environment, I would like to use maybe Revit. Some senior designers don't want to use Revit. They simply want to use AutoCAD. So there are these different variables, and we want to be able to leverage and satisfy these conditions, but within a certain amount of means. And that's why having this tree allows you to understand what are your different tools, how many licenses are available, who else is participating, and so forth. Right? I don't know if you guys are hearing the police siren in the back. This is Los Angeles for you guys. Next module is all about listening, right? Listening means that not only are you listening to the project criteria, you're keeping in mind how the progress is being made. One of the most important things that a lot of project managers tend to forget is informing their teams about what the different criteria is. The criteria that is required, not only from a construction deliverable standpoint, you may very well have a condition where there is post-occupancy related criteria that is needed. Digital data for maintenance of the particular building, for systems and operations, or that very well could be design criteria related data that you need to identify ahead of time so that that becomes the benchmark for what you set in terms of project delivery, in terms of quantity, right? So there are two terms there, delivery as well as quantity for the project. This is very commonplace in educational projects like a university, for instance, because there's a very good chance that there's a particular dining hall or a student housing system that they want to utilize as a benchmark or an example with the criteria that will be replicated in the future at another campus. The same holds good for hospitality projects where you have a certain number of keys, which equals to a certain number of rooms, square footages, the interior design schemes for those rooms, and all that becomes a sort of a module that you work with right off the bat. I have that little box on the right hand side that says how much percentage of aesthetic versus how much percent of empirical, and that simply is an example of, or rather a posit for you to decide as not only a project manager but a team player as to what is given more relevance in terms of your binding factors, the parameters you're working with. And by the way, this picture is of the Vision on Wilshire, which is a project here in Los Angeles that we just completed and has been occupied for about a year now. I particularly like this particular structure and building because it's not only aesthetically very pleasing, it's a very efficiently designed building as well. But let's keep cracking on. So we were talking about listening. Now, in the course that I'm taking with Cornell University, it's an online course, I came across a very important topic that I want to share with you. It's about listening. We as designers have this, or are preconditioned, premeditated to be in our own thought bubbles all the time. Whether you're a designer, you're a technical lead, or you are an actual overall leader within a practice, there's a very good chance you have an inner voice that is telling you what is right versus what seems to be most conducive. And that comes under level 1. There are 3 kinds of levels of listening, right? There's level 1, level 3, and level 2. I don't know why I went upside down, but here you are. All right. So level 1 is inner monologue. That means when you are having a conversation with another team member or a group within your team, you are not only listening to them, but you're also listening to yourself. And there's a very good chance your inner voice is drowning out what the others are telling you, which means, as you can see emboldened there, you are distracted. Level 2 is a little more focused. This is where you are able to stop any kind of distractions like looking at your cell phone, looking at your computer, stop all that and then pay your undivided attention to your team members so you can understand and comprehend what they're saying. This is very important because it's not only about your teamwork, but it's also being present in the moment to listen to the criteria of what this design requires, what the conditions need to be met, not just from a constructability, safety, and programming standpoint, but also from an aesthetic sensitivity standpoint. Level 3 is the highest level of learning. It's almost an enlightened form of learning, and that comes through practice. Believe me when I say that all of us are most definitely always in level 1 and sometimes in level 2. I cannot go with percentages because it varies for people from time to time. In my case, I know for a fact that I catch myself, particularly after taking this course, hearing myself, and I say, okay, you need to stop listening to your inner monologue and then move to level 2 and then level 3. So what's the difference between level 2 and level 3? Level 3 is when you are not only able to listen to someone, but also visually tell where their concerns lie. Emotional intelligence, body language, gestures, anything that can give you an idea of how a particular person is feeling allows you to understand what they are conveying to you. It's a simple but very important observation because that's what design does for us too. It invokes a certain kind of emotions. When you walk into a particular space, there's a very good chance your cognitive mapping will allow you to feel a certain way. It could be something that will leave you in awe, or it could be something very well that will overwhelm your senses and consume you within that particular moment. Notwithstanding, what's happening is this entire stream of events is all coming together and providing you this experience, and that's what happens with listening as well. All right, let's keep going. I think we have about 9 minutes, so I want to keep cracking on. The next module is about asking the right questions. So we looked at the tool chest. What are the different tools available to you and your team, and how you're going to leverage it. Now, asking the right questions starts with your design technology map. So because I am a specialist in BIM and design technology, I always start with this particular map, which allows me to understand that these are the different parts and pieces or the top tier items that will allow me to work with our team members, right? Our team as a group has to realize and achieve these different portions that could very well be related to visualization, generation design, or generative design, computational environment, and so forth. So aside from looking at just a design technology, what I would encourage you to do is go to a step further. And by all means, use this map that you're about to see. So the big picture, right in the center is module number 1, which is project delivery. To the left of it is module number 2. And the right of it is module number 3, the impact. So that's what we were talking about, right? So what's happening over here is you are trying to tie all these different streams together and understand where they are making a maximum impact. Is there an interpersonal relationship between these different streams? That's what you're trying to relate here. And finally, you have the next slide, which is implementing. When I say finally, I meant is, the next step. When it comes to implementing, how are you moving forward with that system? What you're going to do is basically go back to this map where you made a decision based on all the different platforms you have, and you arrive at this. This is an old particular slide that I like to share with everyone, but it gives you a better idea of how an integrated federated model is created for us within the practice. From this federated model, not only are you reporting clashes, not only are you developing your project criteria, you're also developing the documents, the digital data, as well as the project manuals that will invariably go into operations and maintenance of this particular facility. We are in a time where digital data is so abundant that you have all these terms that you see like big data, and the macrocosm as well as the microcosm of all this data allows you to study not only the present conditions, but also foresee future because of analytics. And that's why it's important to make sure that this federated model that you're arriving upon is well conditioned based on all the tools that you came across and systematically arrived at for realizing XYZ as your output from project data standpoint. The next thing to do is summarize how you're going to get all this information together for your project, right? One of the things that I also like to do is a lessons learned equivalent. So you saw this particular map without the little squiggly lines in the back. The first squiggly lines you had seen was the squiggly lines that connected the different tools as well as the different systems. Now this is the blow up of the design technology environment where you are trying to correlate how all these different interoperability relationships are set up. This is most important because you know that if you design a particular object in SketchUp and you're trying to bring it into Revit, what will be the issues? If you are doing something in Rhino, you might as well use Rhino Inside or Conveyor to translate those objects into your Revit environment. But having the knowledge is very important, and that's when you can go back and say, okay, we failed at these particular items, but we were successful at these interoperability conversations, right? And that's what you see over here. You also need to meet frequently and make sure that you are listening, you're asking and reviewing alongside your team members. Remember that when someone is frustrated, it is not a bad thing. It's an opportunity for you to see where their challenges rely and how you can alleviate those concerns by meeting as a team, most importantly. Right? So that's summarizing. Now, I have what is called as the bonus round. I'm going to talk to you a little more about psychology and the idea of how we keep interacting. And this is also based on some of the coursework that I'm presently doing. And I felt like it would be a good time for me to share this with you. One of the things that I have found most interesting is a strength finding test. This is something that all of us as Indians can relate to, right? The big thing is when you are young and you are weak at particular subjects, like for instance, mathematics, your parents will always say, you have to work harder, you have to work harder. Well, strength finding is a little different. What it tells you is identify the different strengths that you have and work on those. Work on sharpening your strengths so that you can get not only better at them, you can be your best at them. One of my strengths that I find to be the most conducive and vocal as well as sparkly in how I approach things is my ability to strategize. I'm an extremely I wouldn't say well qualified, but I would say I'm extremely thoughtful strategizing person. I always am good at looking at problems and drawing a map and saying this is how we resolve it, because these are the different relationships that define the conversations between the parameters. So what I would encourage you to do is go back to your teams and have them take strength finding test. It's a Gallup test. It's available online. You get a very detailed report. It's worth the spending in terms of its cost, and it's devised by this gentleman by the name Don Clifton. The next thing is have your team members understand what is emotional intelligence. I know majority of you already know this, but I wanted to share this with you so that you know that you as a team member, for the greater good, as a team as well as an individual, understand who you are and how you need to react or be proactive in how you approach projects as well as your design acumen. That also is a very important part of decision making as a leader. One of the other conversations I have come across very recently is by this lady named Holly Cardew. She's Australian, and she had very recently a very successful entrepreneur who had published a conversation or an article on LinkedIn about distributed teams, and this really informed and spoke to me. And I'm saying this because right now, particularly in 2020, we're at a time where this particular pandemic that we are facing head on has forced us to go back to our drawing boards and connect with each other virtually. So we are invariably in a place where distributed teams has become a part of the norm. That's the new normal. And what this article tells you is that a team may be distributed, but it is also the most and perhaps the most efficient way to work, connect, and collaborate as well as integrate. So by all means, look at that particular link I have posted at the bottom and read that. It'll give you a good idea of where the term comes from and how all of us currently are a distributed workforce. All right. So I wanted to just say that I am at the conclusion of my presentation and I hope you enjoyed it. I want to share one last slide with you about the present times. I'm a huge fan of David Bowie, and I felt like this would be most appropriate for the time. If you have a chance, go and listen to Space Oddity, which is about a song of an astronaut. His name is Major Tom, who goes into space, steps into the nothingness, but gets stranded in the process and realizes his existential crisis, which is of being alone in a tin can. And it's a beautiful song, very well written, where ground control is trying to make contact with him. And there's this particular line that I really love: "For here I am, sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue and there's nothing I can do." No, you can do something. Talk to your team. Make sure that the decisions you make are important. And with that, I want to say thank you very much for your time. Here are my credentials, and I hope you have a great day.